Welcome to WebRTC Live. In WebRTC Live, we cover the latest technical topics and business use cases for WebRTC and live video. As always, this episode is brought to you by WebRTC.Ventures, leading integrators of WebRTC video into your custom application.
Welcome back to WebRTC Live. I'm your host, Arin Sime, CEO and founder of WebRTC.Ventures. WebRTC.Ventures is a custom design and development firm specializing in live video applications, and we're here to help you take your video applications live. You can learn more about us at WebRTC.Ventures. For today's episode of WebRTC Live, I'm really pleased to have Lorenzo Miniero, PhD, as our guest. Lorenzo is chairman and co-founder of MeetEcho, which is the consultancy behind the Janus WebRTC server. He's also a regular contributor to the IETF standards body around WebRTC, and joins us today from Naples, Italy. He'll be speaking at the Illinois Institute of Tech Real-Time Communications Conference in Chicago this coming October on new features around SFUs, Simulcast, and SVC in WebRTC. And he'll also be hosting the Janus conference later this month in Naples. So welcome, Lorenzo. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
No, thank you for having me here. It's really nice to be here.
Excellent. And so I know as we were coordinating for this conversation, you very kindly traded some emails with me while you were on vacation, and you just recently came back from vacation. So you're in Naples, a beautiful place. Does someone from Naples, where do you go on vacation?
I did the easy thing. So basically, usually people spend a lot of money to come here on vacation. We have a lot of tourists in the summer. So I decided to just follow them. So I stayed here, spent €0 for my vacation. I just stayed in Sorrento, which is my hometown. So I really enjoyed my stay there. So it's been awesome. A great vacation, short, but really refreshing.
They're always too short, for sure. Well, thanks again for joining us right after vacation. So let's start by having you tell us a little bit about the Janus WebRTC server, which you created, and what makes it unique.
Yeah, Janus was born about 5 years ago. So it basically came out of a need that we had. So because we had started already experimenting with WebRTC, tinkering with the existing WebRTC implementations that were starting to come out. Mostly because at the time we were heavily focused on a web conferencing platform, basically a WebRTC web conferencing platform. And so we started playing a bit with the existing tools, and soon we found out that even though they were good and worked fine, they were a bit too vertical for our needs. So we were starting to get some ideas on how to do more interesting things like streaming or other aspects that were not strictly covered by those. And so I basically came up with an idea of a sort of general purpose WebRTC implementation instead. So something where you have a strong core that takes care of all the WebRTC aspects and everything extensible in the backside instead, which is how basically Janus came to light. Basically, we implemented all the WebRTC stack just once so that we didn't really need to update it once a new use case came to the light. And we implemented every use case as different plugins instead, which allowed us to basically just write a new plugin to implement the application logic anytime that something new came out that we couldn't cover with the existing stuff. And soon this seemed to work quite nicely. A lot of people started to get interest to contribute to the project, and now we've grown quite a lot, I think, in these past 5 years.
That's great. So it's nice that having that plugin-based architecture means that it can be very flexible and used for a lot of different use cases in WebRTC. So even though it is very general purpose, at the same time, are there any particular use cases that you think Janus is best suited for?
Yeah, in general, one of the key aspects of Janus is that typically it can be enabler of sorts. So typically any time that you have something that was not strictly conceived with WebRTC in mind, or maybe not even with RTC in mind in general, Janus is a very good tool to put in front of that in order to make that WebRTC compliant and to exchange data with WebRTC endpoints, which might be, for instance, and I'm making a very simple use case here, if you want to do some sort of identity verification via WebRTC, WebRTC gives you all the tools to actually get access to the webcam, to the microphone, to get a video feed to work with. And Janus basically allows you to extract this live feed, send it somewhere else to an external component that Janus knows nothing about, and then you can take care of all the application logic there. At the same time, you can have RTSP cameras, the usual monitoring cameras that people use for monitoring. They are not WebRTC compliant at all, but they use RTP. So it's very easy to use Janus as an intermediary to basically turn an RTSP camera into a WebRTC broadcast of sorts. So any kind of basically interaction between WebRTC users, Janus, and basically everything you want in the backend is something that typically Janus is very strong with, assuming that, of course, you are willing to tinker with it a bit and to play with it a bit.
Right. But the fact that you can put in your own plugins, that's great. So you can connect in any of these external devices or things that, you don't have to build with WebRTC from scratch, but at the same time, you're not limited by what, a CPaaS provider, for example, might have exposed to you through their APIs. You can build your own plugin and do whatever you want with it. So that's definitely a very powerful flexibility there. What's the most interesting use case that you've seen Janus used for?
Oh, there are many actually. A couple that come to mind are media production. Basically, there's a company that is working in the Hollywood space, basically. And they are doing basically media production, media editing for big Hollywood companies, all using WebRTC and using Janus in the backend, which was really interesting for me because I want to meet those Hollywood stars sooner or later,
That's great.
Another interesting use case is one by Mozilla, actually. Mozilla is working on a platform called Hubs that basically allows you to do augmented reality in the browser and stuff like this. And for the WebRTC part, they are also using Janus in the background. They actually wrote their own plugins for their own use cases. They have their own SFU plugin in order to do things like this, which is, let's say, an uncommon scenario, a bit different from the traditional conferencing or relearning things that you can do with Janus, but this is a bit, let's say, more unconventional and so more interesting for me.
Right, nice. So you mentioned the Hollywood stars, and we've also already mentioned what a beautiful place Naples is to visit. That sounds like a good segue to me for you to tell us about the Janus conference coming up in a couple of weeks, and will we see any Hollywood stars there?
I don't know if we'll see any Hollywood stars, but there will be some VoIP and WebRTC stars at least. So that's a good trade-off. Yeah, it's an event that we're really proud of because it's a big step that we wanted to make. I've been attending several conferences in these past few years dedicated to open source projects like Camilo World or the OpenSIP Summit, Astricon, ClueCon very recently in Chicago. And I've always had a great time there. I've always loved the community that these events manage to create around the open source project itself. And so I wanted to try and do something similar for Janus as well, because I know that we have a very good community, a lot of people working together, a lot of contributions. And I know that a lot of people are doing very interesting and creative things with Janus all over the world. And so I wanted to try and create a space for all of these people to try and share what they've been doing, how they've been using Janus, the challenges they faced, and how they fixed them so that people can actually contribute, but also learn about all of the other things. And possibly also a place where we can have some workshops, a place where people can learn about how to use Janus, how to debug issues, how to, I don't know, do a large-scale networking test or whatever. So all of these things that basically can happen much more easily if we are all together in the same place for a few days. And that's basically how the event was born. And we chose to host it in Napoli mostly because it's a very beautiful place, as you said, and very popular for tourism, but it's not as popular in terms of a venue for tech events. And so usually they tend to happen somewhere else, either in the US or somewhere else in Europe. And instead I wanted to try and have such an event in Naples instead, to try also to invite people and have people visit Naples. Take this as an opportunity to also take a bit of vacation and go around and see Pompeii or Sorrento or other places as well.
Nice. That sounds really great. So for those who might want to attend, it's September 23rd through 25th. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So a couple weeks from now in Napoli, and the website is JanusCon.it. So I can't make it this year, unfortunately, but I hope you will do it again next year, because I'm going to put that on the calendar. It sounds wonderful. So excellent. So let's talk about your next trip to Chicago then. Coming up in October, on October 15th, you'll be speaking on our WebRTC track at the IIT RTC Conference, and your talk is titled SFUs, Simulcast, and SVC, What's New in WebRTC. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you'll be discussing in that talk?
Yeah, SVC and Simulcast in particular are two hot topics in the in WebRTC right now. Also, specifically from the ITF perspective, because there have been some discussions in terms of what the proper way to standardize these are, and the different ways that browsers tend to implement them at the moment. So there were actually a couple of very interesting events with respect to these at the ITF itself lately, and more specifically at the ITF hackathon. So I don't know how much people are familiar with the ITF in principle and the hackathon there, but the ITF typically meets 3 times a year all over the world, and the ITF is basically where all the standardization of web protocols happens, basically, and it's also where the protocols aspects of WebRTC have been worked upon. And before each ITF meeting, it's been a tradition now that they always host a so-called hackathon there. So people meet there for a couple of days and start hacking and working together on aspects related to those standard protocols that people are working on. And there's, of course, also a hackathon on WebRTC itself that's typically organized by Harald Bestron from Google and Alex Gouillard from Cosmos Software. And a couple of editions ago was the first time that I also joined it, and the main topic was indeed Simulcast, and it was a perfect actually opportunity because all the browser developers were there, a lot of SFU developers were there as well, and so it was the perfect venue to start and figuring out what was basically not working in terms of interoperability between the browsers, what could actually cause problems when interacting with SFUs. And basically, my presentation will be about all of this journey and basically also what's going to happen next. Because for Simulcast, there have been some, let's say, breaking changes a few months ago where they basically, SSRCs disappeared and people start worrying and stuff like this. And for SVC, there are let's say, a few problems related to how to actually enable SVC right now. So, for instance, at the last ITF hackathon, in Montreal, we basically started hacking a bit also with respect to that, because right now for SVC, you need to launch Chrome with a specific Chrome flag enabled, while instead you may want to use the JavaScript APIs in order for this to work. And so the discussion there was, how do we get these JavaScript APIs in place, because they are there from a standardization perspective, they are not hooked in the browsers yet. Which flavors of SVC are we going to enable? How is AV1 going to play with respect to SVC in particular, because SVC is going to have a very strong role in AV1, and AV1 will be very important in WebRTC in a few years. So all of these aspects are basically all of the things that I plan to, let's say, anticipate and discuss a bit during the presentation in order to basically have a glimpse in both the present and the future of the technology.
Perfect. Yeah, that's going to be a really interesting talk. I'm looking forward to it myself. So, so you've been involved in WebRTC for a long time, and so first, for all of us in the WebRTC community, thanks for that. We certainly appreciate all of your work around that. What has surprised you the most over the last 6 to 10 years?
No, I mean, I was very surprised by how quickly things could be done from the very beginning, because we know that WebRTC has been around for a long time, and it hasn't been a smooth journey, let's say, because of course there have been browsers implementing different versions of the same standard, then different versions of the same things, multi-stream and all of those aspects, and we're still fighting with these still today. I mean, there are a lot of problems still to this day, but from the very beginning, you could get something very similar to what we are having here which was really great because it basically allowed us to get rid of all of the plugins that we were working on at the time, Java, Flash-based, and so on, and start tinkering with RTP directly in the browser itself. And so I was really surprised and excited about also by the level of effort that the whole open source community developed into this, because I'm firmly convinced that if WebRTC is so successful today, it's also because a lot of open source projects start working in that direction. We have a lot of very good SFUs out there, which may look similar from some aspects, but are very unique and specific in their own ways. All of them basically. Then you have ways to do pretty much whatever you want to with WebRTC. And also WebRTC basically proved to actually be the standard de facto in basically everything related to RTC right now. And you are seeing it being used in use cases where you actually could not think about it at the very beginning. It's used in gaming, it's used in telemedicine, it's used in Internet of Things, or in augmented reality, as we were saying. So it's becoming really a pervasive technology, and which is actually used wherever you actually need any kind of real-time data to be exchanged, which is the thing that really excites me the most.
Yeah, I agree. I love that aspect of working in this field as well. Excellent. Thanks, Lorenzo. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention today before we close out? Any latest news about Janus or MeetEcho that you want to make sure our viewers know about?
No, I mean, we've already discussed the conference that is about to happen in a couple of weeks. So I'll actually make a presentation there. The very first presentation will be around the past, the present, and the future of Janus. So I will go through a bit of history. I will say where we are at the moment, what you can do, and I'll also explain a bit the possible directions that the project may have in the next few months or even years. So if this is something that you are interested in learning about, please, by all means, visit the website, purchase a ticket, join us, and let's discuss all this together.
Excellent. Well, best of luck with the conference, and I look forward to seeing you in Chicago and next month as well. So thanks again for joining us, Lorenzo.
Thanks again for the invite.
Oh, my pleasure. So just a couple closing words here. In addition to being able to replay this on Crowdcast, we'll post this episode to the blog on WebRTC.ventures and to YouTube next week. And if you want to keep up with upcoming events and interviews like this, join our email list at WebRTC Ventures or follow us on Crowdcast. Two upcoming episodes I want to plug really quickly. 2 weeks from today, on Thursday, September 19th at noon Eastern, we'll speak with Arin Sime from CallStats about contact center quality and an update about CallStats. And then on Thursday, October 3rd, also at noon Eastern, we will speak with Kyle Bank from Phoenix Real-Time Solutions about trivia and gaming use cases in WebRTC. That'll be a really interesting conversation as well. And coming up later in October, we'll be reporting from the IIT RTC Conference in Chicago. And also, we'll be speaking with, look for the date to be announced soon, be speaking with Dr. Alex about real-time AV1 in October, and with more guests too. So don't forget, you can register also for that RTC conference in Chicago, October 14th through 16th. There's also an associated TAD Hack and TAD Summit. You can get more information and register at rtc-conference.com. And if you use the promo code FFSPKR, you'll get $100 off your registration. FFSPKR for friends and family of speakers. So hope to see you in Napoli or in Chicago. Thanks again, Lorenzo. Let's make it live.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for WebRTC Live. Visit our website at WebRTC.ventures to learn more about our custom design and development services, and to learn more about upcoming episodes of WebRTC Live.